Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you. So our next witness is Matthew Lenton. Please could the witness be sworn?
I do solemnly.
I do solemnly.
Sincerely and truly.
Sincerely and truly.
Declare and affirm.
Declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Okay, I'd like to sit down.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lenton. As you know, my name is Miss Hodge and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please state your full name.
Matthew Guy Lenton.
You should have in front of you a hard copy of your witness statement dated the 14th of May 2024. Is that right? That statement should run to 54 pages, including an index of documents. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could I ask you please to turn to page 51 of your statement?
Yep.
You should see there at the middle of the page a statement of truth and a signature. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
Is the content of the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I'm going to begin just by asking some short questions about your academic and professional background, please.
Okay.
In 1987, you obtained a bachelor's degree in film studies and philosophy from the University of Kent.
Correct.
Before joining Fujitsu in 2006, you worked for various companies in the field of document control. Is that right?
Correct.
Could you please explain, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, what document control entails?
Yeah, so basically it's somebody doing that role is normally employed by obviously an organisation that generates large volumes of normally technical but or otherwise formal documentation. So I worked for Arup, the consulting engineers, also for British Gas, and that was before working for Fujitsu, and obviously those companies all produce large volumes of technical drawings, specifications, etc. It's clearly important that people using those documents know what version they're using, etc., and that old documents are preserved and records are correctly kept, basically. And because of the volume, they employ somebody specifically, or often a team, in fact, specifically do that. And it also involves things such as formal reviews and approvals of documents with other parties and internal peer reviewers.
Thank you. When you joined Fujitsu in November 2006, that was in the role of document manager, is that right?
Correct.
You initially worked on several different accounts, albeit temporarily on the post office account as well, is
Correct.
that right? Mm-hmm. Before you were employed permanently as a document manager in May 2009?
Yeah, before being employed permanently as a document manager on post office accounts, I was actually recruited by Fujitsu to work on the NHS account.
Thank you. And you remain in that role to the present day, is that
correct?
Is there more than one document manager on the post office account, or are you the document manager?
No, that is me, and I have an assistant. That's it.
And who's your assistant?
So currently it's somebody called Ashwini Vijayan who works in Chennai.
And previously?
Previously we had somebody called Hanifa Tariq Mohammed, also works in Chennai, and then before that there have been various other people that have worked with me from 2008 until about 2015 or 16.
Okay, thank you. We may come to identify some of
Sure.
those shortly. So far as you're aware, for how long had the role of document manager existed in the post office account?
Since around 1998, I think.
Just some small points of clarification, please. Is it right you don't have any formal qualifications or training in information technology?
I'm not sure about that. I think I actually do have a formal qualification in IT. I think it's what used to be known as an NVQ, but I'm not sure that exists any longer, so it's probably not recognised.
Okay, thank you. And would it be correct that you don't have any legal qualifications or training?
Correct.
I'd like to ask you, please, some questions about the core part of your role as document manager for the post office account. Please could we show the witness's statement, WITN 00530100. Thank you. On page 3, please, you describe the Post Office Account Document Manager role. And in your statement, you say at paragraph 8, the core part of my role as document manager for the Post Office account is the responsibility for ensuring that design documentation and key process documentation is controlled. The basis of that control is the use of a single repository for such documentation, which is a configuration management database known as Dimensions. The database provides the Post Office account clarity on the latest version of current documents and that previous superseded versions, as well as obsolete documents, are retained. Now, would it be right to say that here you're emphasising the need for there to be one place where all design and key process documentation are held?
Correct.
One of the reasons for that would be to ensure that such documents are distributed or disclosed appropriately. Is that right?
Disclosed. The original purpose of it is not for that purpose. It's so that people using the documents in terms of the staff in the company can know that they are referring to the correct version of a document, so that we don't have, multiple versions of documents in various places on local hard drives, etc., that people are looking at that may be out of date.
So the principal purpose would be an internal one?
Correct.
But it would equally be...
It can therefore be used for
externally.
other purposes, such as you suggest, yeah.
Another reason for having a single repository would be to ensure that they're retained appropriately. Is that fair?
Correct, yeah.
Is it right that during the period with which we are concerned, the Post Office account did not adhere to this key principle of document control?
It may, no, I'm not sure that's true, actually. So in terms of the documentation that is stored within Dimensions, as far as I'm aware, all of the documents that have been placed into Dimensions since, I think, before 2000 are still there and are still version controlled.
I'm going to ask you, Mr. Lenton, about another repository, which is the SSC website.
Sure.
And we may explore whether or not that contains key process documentation, as you've defined there. Now, one of the repositories to which you refer in your statement is a dedicated website that was used by the SSC for incident management and support documentation. Is that right?
Right, yes, correct.
That website, you say, contained work instructions relating to the reporting and management of bugs, errors and defects. Is that right?
Sorry, can you just repeat the last bit of that?
Work instructions relating to the reporting and management of bugs, errors and defects.
I'm not sure that it did contain work instructions for that. I mean, certainly there may be some overlap with processes that do deal with that issue.
So if we could look, please, at page 6. At paragraph 20, please. The final sentence there reads, there are also internal SSC-specific work instructions that relate to the reporting and management of bugs, errors and defects, which are stored.
So, sure, yeah. So reporting and management, yes. So at a low level, I would say. So they're work instructions rather than procedures and processes.
Thank you. In relation, what's also contained on the website are peaks and kells, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Now, would it be fair to characterise those documents as key process documents, a known error log?
A known error log isn't really a process document, it's actually a record of an incident or of the symptoms of certain incidents. Whereas a process document would be one that tells you how to actually record or manage incidents generally. So I see the point you're making, but I think that kells are very specific to individual incidents, whereas when I'm referring to process documents about how to manage incidents, I'm talking about much higher level, such as incident management procedure, for example, which wouldn't in itself contain any details of any BEDs.
Thank you. When did you first learn about the existence of the SSC website?
I suspect I probably heard of it shortly after joining the account, maybe in 2009 or 10.
What did you understand the website to contain at that stage?
It's a bit hard to say what I understood at that time. I mean, I think I knew that it contained peaks, and I think I had a fairly vague idea of what peaks were. But I didn't regularly come across them, to be honest, as I wasn't really involved in that area of work.
When did you first obtain access to the website?
In 2016.
Before you were granted access to the SSC website, so far as you are aware, was it accessed and controlled solely by members of the SSC?
That is my understanding, yeah.
Why was that the case, do you know?
I'm not totally sure. My understanding is that for historic reasons, the SSC were originally part of a division in Fujitsu, which wasn't directly part of the post office account. So they would have dealt with other accounts as well as the post office. So it's kind of like a shared services support team. So because of that, they would have had their own repository for dealing with incidents across the various accounts. So it'd be owned by that division rather than by the post office account itself.
Do you know who within the SSC was responsible for administering the website?
In the time since I've worked there, I believe it has been administered by John Simpkins and Mark Wright, and probably with the assistance of various other people.
Did you consider it was appropriate in your role as document manager for the SSC to have exclusive control over this website and its content?
I'm not sure whether... So that probably is a question that I had debated with myself at certain times. And I think I just accepted it as being the way that it was and had been for many years. And so, I mean, I think if I'd questioned it, I'm not sure that I would necessarily have changed anything, should we say.
Why were you granted access to the website in 2016?
I can't remember now actually what the specific reason was that prompted it, but I think it was possibly wanting to look at peaks which related to document updates, so that occasionally, if it had been noticed that during something like testing, for example, that a document had an incorrect statement in it, then the testers may raise a peak that say that the document needs to be updated. And therefore, I think when I was being asked whether a document had been updated correctly or not, or whether the progress had been made on that update, then it was useful to look at peak. But I think that possibly, well, as I say, I'm not sure why, particularly in 2016, that came up.
Thank you.
I'll just say I don't think it's in any way related to the issues that we're discussing here. I think it's something unrelated.
Part of your role as document manager involved liaison with the post office, is that correct?
Yes, correct, yeah.
If we could turn to page 3, please, of your witness statement at paragraph 8. You say there in the final sentence, document issues and receipts between Fujitsu and Post Office Limited, as well as other parties, are controlled via a central mailbox owned by me, and those transactions are recorded and the emails stored. You seem here to be referring to the present tense. Is that fair? They are controlled by you?
Correct.
Has that central mailbox been used throughout the time on which you've worked on the post office account?
Yes, it has.
Are you the only member of the account who has access to the central mailbox?
No. So the person I mentioned who assists me at the moment, she has access, and since I've worked there, all the other people that have worked with me have also had access to it.
Would it be right to understand that this is an internal Fujitsu mailbox to which those outside the organisation wouldn't have access?
Correct.
Did you respond to or oversee all requests for access to documents from the post office from the date of your appointment as document manager?
Well, only as far as I know. So if other people on the account received requests directly from people within post office, then it was expected that they would pass them to me, but it's perfectly possible that people may have answered them directly without me knowing.
If you did not obtain access to the SSC website until July 2016, does it follow that you did not provide to the post office any documents that were held solely on that site before that date?
That sounds likely. I mean, I can't say that that's definitely the case, because it's possible that somebody may have sent me something internally that I then passed on, but that sounds unlikely to me because there wouldn't have been any need for me to record it.
From quite an early stage in your tenure as document manager, you started to handle requests relating to Horizon data integrity. Is that correct?
Yes.
In your statement, you say you recall processing and disclosing to the post office 2 reports produced by Gareth Jenkins on the subject of data integrity. Is that right?
Correct.
What caused these particular documents to stand out in your memory?
Mainly the fact that they relate to the issues that we're discussing here. So obviously when I'm asked about them, then that's effectively the first documents that I remember dealing with that directly related to this issue. I mean, they were obviously also slightly unusual documents in that most of the documents that I would have dealt with related to the implementation of the solution or processes relating to the implementation, whereas these clearly are reports on an aspect of it rather than being design documents, as it were.
And were they documents that you held in dimensions?
Yes.
But they were of a different character to the other documents that you held there. Is that what you're saying in essence?
Well, I'm saying that because of the nature of them, they were perhaps somewhat memorable in terms of being different from most of the other documents, which are things like high-level designs, test reports, etc.
At the point when you first came to handle and pass on these documents to the post office, what, if anything, did you know about Gareth Jenkins' role in the post office account?
Yeah, I already knew who he was. I mean, he was one of the most senior architects on the account. He sat just upstairs from me. I had spoken to him before, so I knew perfectly well who he was.
Do you recall being asked in October 2013 to set up a SharePoint site on which to store documentation relating to data integrity?
Yes.
This became known as the Data Integrity SharePoint, is that right?
Correct.
Did you know why you were asked to set up that SharePoint?
I suppose in general terms I did, but I wasn't particularly aware at that time of the investigations going on within Post Office or of the mediation scheme or second sight, etc. So not in detail, basically.
What did you understand in general terms?
Well, obviously only that there was some question over the integrity of the data and that various work was being done between Fujitsu and the Post Office and I think various other parties to investigate that issue.
Who was granted access to the Data Integrity SharePoint?
So I don't think I'd be able to give you the full list, but my recollection is that it's about 10 people within the post office account only. So people such as James Davidson, Torsten Goddeseth, Gareth Jenkins, and about 5 or 6 other people, I think.
How did you determine who ought to have access to the SharePoint?
I'm sure I was just asked to provide access to those people.
Did any, so far as you're aware, would any post office employees have had access to that SharePoint?
No.
How did you decide which documents were to be stored on the SharePoint?
I was asked to download them from Dimensions and put them on there. So, again, I can't really remember who it was who asked me to do it, but one of those same people that I mentioned earlier.
Who would have identified to you which documents were relevant?
Yeah, so probably either Gareth Jenkins or Torsten Goddeseth.
Did you take any steps to consult with members of the SSC about what could or should be stored on the SharePoint relating to data integrity?
No.
Why not?
I don't think there was any reason to do that. So I was really only doing what I was asked to do, to set up the site, give access to certain people, add certain documents to it.
Did you obtain any documents from sources other than Dimensions?
As far as I recall, no.
Were you aware that Gareth Jenkins held a lot of relevant data on his laptop and on a server share at that time?
I don't think I knew that as a fact, no. I mean, I may have guessed that. It was common that people did hold lots of data on their laptops and on file shares at that time.
Perhaps it might help if we just look at that email, FUJ 00156 please. Thank you. So this is an email from James Davidson. Is that who you believe asked you to set up the SharePoint site? You're not either the recipient or copied into this email, but what it confirms, we can see at the second bullet point, is that you, Matthew Lenton, were in the process of setting up the site for all documentation relating to data integrity, for that to be stored. He goes on to say Gareth has a lot of data which is on his laptop and on his server share currently, but this will prove us all, presumably provide us all, with a place to keep drafts, WIP, work in progress, and historical documentation. So I think it's your evidence you weren't specifically told that by Mr. Davidson, is that correct?
No, I don't think I was, and I actually don't think that happened either. So I don't think that we did end up storing a lot of data from Gareth into that SharePoint site.
Thank you. So far as you can recall, did you have any contact or communication with Gareth Jenkins at this time about what he held on issues of data?
No, I don't think so. As I say, I think the SharePoint site only contained documents that I added to it from Dimensions, as far as I recall.
Thank you. When did you first start liaising with Mr. Jenkins directly over issues of data integrity?
I'm sure it was probably the 2 reports, so the Horizon and the H&GX data integrity reports.
Because you obtained those directly from him?
Well, I know they were written by him, so it seems perfectly possible, even likely, that I would have checked with him that they were the latest versions and that he hadn't made any other changes to them. Yeah, before that, I don't think I would have had any reason to discuss it with him.
And when you say you would have checked, this is from the point of view of version control, rather than in relation to the content of the documents, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's simply, I might have, say, version 1, and I would perhaps check with him that there wasn't a more recent version that I didn't yet have that he wanted to provide to Post Office instead.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to a new topic, please, which concerns your involvement in the group litigation brought by sub-postmasters and others against the Post Office. In your statement, you explained that your role was to field requests for information and evidence from the Post Office's lawyers, Womble Bond Dickinson, to direct those requests to the appropriate subject matter expert within Fujitsu, and to provide responses back to Womble Bond Dickinson. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
You identify in your statement 6 individuals from whom you obtained information about Horizon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perhaps if we could just turn up your statement, please, where that is addressed at page 18, paragraph 47. Can you tell us, please, for the benefit of those following your evidence, who each of those individuals were and their roles? You've dealt already with Mr. Jenkins.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Pete Newsom was, his job title was often something like consulting manager or something like that, but he was somebody who worked on the Post Office account and I believe had worked quite closely with Post Office themselves in terms of actually working in their offices on some occasions. But he was also kind of in charge of commercial change at a kind of high level, so in terms of discussing and fielding changes that the Post Office wanted to implement. So effectively he was a kind of senior kind of commercial change manager. Stephen Parker was the manager of the SSC. John Simpkins and Mark Wright were both team leads in the SSC. So I think basically they were kind of Steve Parker's deputies. I think they had kind of half a dozen or so people working under them. And Torsten Goddeseth was the senior architect on the account. So I think he was, effectively he was senior to Gareth Jenkins, I think.
Thank you. Would it be right to say these were not the only individuals from whom you obtained information? You say they were the principal ones.
That's right, yeah. So sometimes we would ask other members of the account for help with obtaining certain bits of information. So various subject matter experts from various teams.
How did you determine to whom within Fujitsu a request for information should be directed?
So often that would just be simply by discussion with other people. I mean, so the staff on the account are kind of, so all the people listed here were on the account for quite a long period of time, and obviously I had also been on the account for, about 10 years by this time, so we obviously knew who dealt with which types of issues and who had expertise in certain areas. Personally, I would have seen many document updates from being provided by various architects, for example, or service managers, so I would know who was subject matter expert in certain areas.
Who within Fujitsu was responsible for determining what was or was not disclosed to the Post Office's lawyers?
I suppose ultimately, in terms of this exercise, it was Pete Newsom, I guess, as he was effectively managing this kind of small virtual team of people mentioned here, plus me.
What were you told about the role that Gareth Jenkins was to play in supporting the Post Office's defence in the group litigation?
I'm not sure I was told anything specifically in those terms. I think it was simply that when we were looking at providing answers to questions that came to us from WBD, then I think it had been determined that this team of people would help to analyse the information in order to answer those questions. and he was one of those people because of his long-standing expertise and knowledge on Horizon. So I don't think I was told anything specifically about what his role would be other than in those terms.
We know that some of the individuals named there gave witness statements in support of the Post Office's defence. Who was responsible for determining which of Fujitsu's employees were to give witness evidence?
I suspect that was between probably conversations between Pete Newsom, possibly Chris J, the Fujitsu, I think he's a lawyer. I'm not quite sure what his qualifications are, and with WBD, I suspect.
Did you know why Mr. Jenkins was not asked to provide a witness statement?
I believe I wasn't directly involved in that, so I'm not sure. I think it may be because of the fact that he was no longer a Fujitsu employee by that time.
Did you know why he was being asked to feed information and evidence to other witnesses, such as Mr. Godsev?
Feed. So, I mean, I think he's providing analysis, so he's being asked his opinion on various issues. So, and I'm not sure that I would necessarily have seen it as being characterised in that way, but I'm aware that other people have characterised it like that.
Did you have any concerns at the time about this approach to the preparation of the witness evidence that was being provided by Fujitsu?
Personally, no.
The next topic I would like to address with you, please, concerns the very late disclosure by Fujitsu of a substantial number of known error logs. Is it right that you were informed in late November 2017 that the Post Office was required to declare the locations in which documents relevant to the operation of Horizon were held?
Yes, I was indirectly made aware of that by being presented with the EDQ, yeah. So I wasn't, I mean, when I say indirectly, I wasn't told that that was what needed to be done in the terms in which you've just expressed it.
You were asked, were you not, by Womble Bond Dickinson to attend a conference call on the 30th of November 2017?
Yes.
The purpose of that call being to assist them to understand which documents were held by Fujitsu and where they were stored, is that right?
Yes.
You attended that call with 2 other Fujitsu employees, is that right?
I believe so.
Could you confirm their names and roles?
I think that was probably Pete Newsom and Chris J.
And you understand Chris J to be an internal Fujitsu lawyer?
So he's a member of the Fujitsu legal team at that time, yeah.
To assist you, please could we turn up FUJ 00158-114? Thank you. In the second half of the page, please. We have an email here dated 28th of November 2017 from Amy Prime, an employee of Womble Bond Dickinson. It's addressed to you, Pete Newsom, and Chris J, who's referred there as Defence Legal.
Yes.
And others copied. Chris, Matthew, Pete, Post Office are required to inform the court of the location in which potentially relevant documents are located. Relevant document is a very broad term and will encompass pretty much all dealings which Fujitsu have had with Post Office in relation to Horizon and HNGX, spanning emails, both with POL and internally, documents stored in dimension, transaction and event data, HSD logs, peak system, and any other document produced by Fujitsu which relates to Horizon. I appreciate this may be a large volume of documents, so as we can understand the documents held by Fujitsu and where they are stored, it would be helpful if we could have a call. Now, do you have any recollection of what was discussed at that meeting?
I must admit, I don't really remember the meeting. I remember that I did attend it. I don't recall the discussions that took place.
A week later, you were sent by Womble Bond Dickinson a draft appendix to the Post Office's electronic directions questionnaire, is that right?
Yes.
In which they'd attempted to summarise the documents held by Fujitsu.
Yes.
So if we just scan up while we're on this document, please. To the top, thank you. This is an email now from Michael Wharton, again to the same recipients. As discussed on Thursday's call, I've attached our draft appendix to the EDQ, the Electronic Directions Questionnaire, summarising the documents held by Fujitsu. Please could I ask you, first, to review it generally and confirm you're happy with it, and second, confirm the specific points highlighted in yellow in the attached. He goes on to say, please accept our apologies for the delay in getting this over to you, such that it is now urgent. However, please can I ask you to come back to me with your comments by 2:30 this afternoon, as the EDQ needs to be exchanged today. Your help is greatly appreciated. Now, obviously, that email's timed at 10:18 a.m. on the Wednesday, so you were given just over 4 hours.
Yes.
Could we please look at the document attached to that email? So this is the draft appendix, which is at FUJ 0015819. My apologies, 115. Now, you make the point in your statement you didn't have very long in which to review the document. It wasn't lengthy, though, was it? It ran to just over 2 pages.
That's true.
And would it be fair to say you did have sufficient time to consult with your colleagues on a number of points that you raise in the statement?
Yes, although, yeah, I mean, my recollection and what I see when I look back at the comments on it now are that basically I consulted with colleagues on the points which had been highlighted, as I think Michael Wharton mentions in his email. And then if I spotted any other things that I knew to be incorrect, then I commented on those as well. So I think if I read the rest of it and didn't either see sections of it highlighted to be queried or spot that there was something wrong myself, then I'm not sure that I'm pretty sure I didn't generally send this on a review to other people as a whole.
Thank you.
If that makes sense.
So just to look at what we have here, this is obviously one of several appendix dealing with databases of electronic documents, but these specifically are Fujitsu's databases, is that right?
Correct.
Now, if we look at just above the table, it states this information has been provided by Fujitsu to Post Office. Yep. Now, presumably that was in the meeting that you had on the 30th of November. Sorry, not attended solely by you, but by Pete Newsom and Chris Jay as well.
Yes, correct. Yeah, although it is possible. I mean, I've reflected on this, and it does seem to me possible that Pete Newsom had separate either conversations or emails with WBD. But as I say, I don't recall the details of the meeting, and certainly information relating to Kells wouldn't have come from me, so it's not clear to me whether it was in that meeting or not.
When you say it's possible he had other communications,
Yeah.
Were you copied into those?
I don't think so, because I think I actually have looked to see whether that is the case or not. So.
And you haven't found anything?
No.
The first row in the table concerns the known error log. Mm-hmm. And in the middle column, it provides a description of it. To this effect, the KEL is a proprietary database with approximately 4,000 entries containing information which is used by Fujitsu to explain how to deal with or work around minor issues that can sometimes arise in Horizon, for which, often because of their triviality, system-wide fixes have not been developed and implemented. Now, do you recall providing that information to the Post Office's lawyers during your call?
No.
By whom do you think that information was provided?
So if there was only three of us on the call, I could only assume that it would be Pete Newsom. But again, so the reason that I say I think it seems possible, perhaps even likely, that he got that information from elsewhere and provided it to WBD separately from that meeting is that, or possibly within the meeting, but certainly not from me, and it's possibly it came from elsewhere, is that I don't think he would have necessarily come up with that definition on his own. So that sounds like something that somebody from the SSC would have provided him with.
And was that something that you knew, that you had knowledge of at that time? What is described there in relation to the KEL?
No, not without asking somebody else to provide that information, no.
The next entry, please, in the column entitled Comments, reads, the KEL only contains the current database entries and is constantly updated, and so the current version will not necessarily reflect the version that was in place at the relevant time. Yeah. And now here, the previous entries / versions of the current entries are no longer available. Again, do you recall providing that information?
No.
By whom do you think that information was provided?
So again, I suspect that went to, I'm guessing really, but I could only assume that went to WBD from Pete Newsom, but I would also expect that he got that information from somebody in SSC. I have to say, we know that last statement that you just read out is incorrect, but I don't know why it's incorrect, and I've looked to see whether we can trace the source of that error, but I haven't been able to. And it strikes me now that it's possibly even just been heard by somebody incorrectly. Perhaps it doesn't mean available, but means valid or something like that.
When you read that, when you reviewed the document, as you were asked to do by Womble Bond Dickinson, that didn't jump out at you? No, I don't think that I was, I know that I wasn't familiar enough with KELs at that time to have had an opinion on that, actually. In March 2018, so several months later, you provided to Womble Bond Dickinson approximately 8,300 KEL entries, is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
Who had supplied those entries to you?
So those would have come from the SSC, and I think it was probably John Simpkins who obtained them and provided them.
At the time that you provided those entries, you were asked by Womble Bond Dickinson to confirm whether the documents you had provided contained all historic and current KEL entries. Is that right?
Sounds correct, yeah.
Let's take a look at that email, please. FUJ 00220950. On page 3, please. Thank you. So we have an email from Amy Prime, again of Womble Bond Dickinson, dated 23rd of March 2018, to you, and copied into Chris J at Defence Legal, Pete Newsom, and I think some other lawyers from Womble Bond Dickinson.
Yes.
It reads, Matthew, thank you. We've safely received the documents. There's also a file named KEL Complete uploaded to the data room. Please could you confirm if this contains all historic and current KEL entries? So that was a question that was raised specifically of you.
Yes.
What did you understand historic KEL entries to mean?
Yeah, so I think my interpretation of that was, and actually still is now, that it means KEL entries that are no longer applicable. So rather than old versions of KELs that have since been updated, it means old KELs that are no longer current KELs, so no longer applicable to the current system.
So obsolete, but for a different reason?
Obsolete because the KEL as a whole is no longer valid, rather than them being superseded versions of KELs, yeah.
We'll come on in a bit to the terminology.
Yeah.
It gets a little complicated, but thank you. Now, bearing in mind what the electronic directions questionnaire had said, if the KEL only contained current database entries, from where had the historic entries been obtained?
So I think I go on to explain all of that actually in another email to Amy Prime, probably after this, I guess. So there are various statuses that KELs could have. So they could either be the currently applicable KELs, in other words, the ones that the SSC would consult that were deemed to relate to the current version of Horizon.
Sorry, can I pause you? Because we will come to that email.
Okay.
That's quite some time later, though. Mm-hmm. What I want to ask you about is what you thought at the time that you received this email. So we dealt firstly with a questionnaire in late November 2017, which said the KEL database only holds current entries of KELs. Now, here we have an email from Amy Prime, March 2018, which says, have we got all historic and current KEL entries? And so what I'm asking you is, at the time, did you ask yourself, well, from where are these historic entries if the database only holds current KELs?
I'm not sure that I did ask that, but I may well have discussed it with John Simpkins, but I think I took the KELs that he had provided me with. But again, I think this is the distinction between a historic KEL and a superseded version of a KEL.
Okay, we'll come on to that terminology shortly. Now, to answer this question that Ms. Prime had raised about the upload that had been made in March, as you say, you sought some clarification from John Simpkins. Is that correct?
I think I probably did.
If we scroll up, please, to page 1. Thank you. So your email to him of the 23rd of March 2018 is at the bottom. John, I uploaded the KELs to Womble Dickinson's site and let Pete know I'd done it, but it sounds like maybe he hasn't told them, so they're checking. Amy Prime asking, please could you confirm if this contains all historic current KELs? The answer presumably is yes. Am I okay to repeat the information you gave to Pete below as the answer to Amy? And he responds, yes and yes. For reference, the information below related to the distinction between a Horizon KEL and a legacy Horizon KEL and a Horizon Online KEL. Is that correct? How to distinguish the two?
That's right. I think he includes a screenshot, doesn't he, showing the difference, yeah.
Is that the answer which you gave to Womble Dickinson? To the effect that, yes, they had all historic?
I assume it is, yes.
Approximately 6 months later, you received a further request from the Post Office's lawyers to provide any KEL entries relating to the calendar square bug. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You initially provided to them some statements and material relating to the bug. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you told them that you didn't believe that there was a KEL relating to that particular bug. Is that right?
So I think it transpired that there wasn't one in the set that we had given to them, and therefore it looked like there wasn't one.
Was that the basis on which you said, I believe there isn't one?
I'm not quite sure, but I suspect that if I may well have checked with either John Simpkins or Mark Wright, and if it wasn't in the set that we provided to WBD, then I expect that if they went and looked for it, they wouldn't have found it.
Just to assist you, the relevant email chain's at FUJ 00179 please. Thank you. The original request can be found on page 4, please. forgive me, if we just scroll down a little bit, please, to the email from Lucy Bremner. Thank you. So this is dated 11th of September, addressed to you and Pete Newsome. This email not copied to Mr. J on this occasion, the lawyer. It reads, Matthew Pete, you may recall a while ago I asked you to provide information on Calendar Square, Falkirk. Apologies if I've missed your response. However, I think this request may still be outstanding. So chasing up an earlier request, it would appear. Is that fair?
It sounds like it, yes.
Please, could you provide me with any information you have on this? Could you also confirm whether KELS exists for this bug? If we follow up to your initial response, please. You initially replied 12th of September. Lucy, the attached email I sent to you in July included the zip file that was originally provided to Second Sight and which includes information relating to the Calendar Square case. I don't believe there is a related KEL, but I will check for other information. And my question was what the basis of that assertion was, and I think your answer is that it wasn't contained within the original batch, and therefore you'd assumed that it didn't exist.
So I think it's, looking at that now, I think it's quite likely that when we provided WBD with the set of KELs, I believe we also uploaded the same set onto our SharePoint site, which therefore was separate from the SSC's original database. But then
can I just clarify, which SharePoint site are you referring to? Is this the data integrity?
So it is actually a sub-site within that site. Yeah, that's correct. So it contained all of the KEL. So this is basically a means of keeping a record of what we had provided to WBD. So it seems perfectly possible that I would have searched that and then not found it. But it may also be the case, and seems very likely, that I would have spoken to John Simpkins about it, or Mark Wright, and they may have looked for it as well.
Is this you say before this email? Because we'll come on to see you did seek some clarification from John Simpkins, but it's the basis of your assumption.
Yeah, so it's not completely clear from this because, I mean, one thing you have to remember is that not all of the conversations I had with people such as John and Mark were done by email, since they sat on the floor directly above me. So I may well have gone and spoken to them.
Okay. If we scroll up, please. So essentially, forgive me, we can keep going up through. There's some back and forth between you and Ms. Bremner over what materials held relevant to Calendar Square.
Yes.
And you provide some additional material, including statements from Gareth Jenkins, is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And then thank you. On the 24th of September, Ms. Bremner says, on our call last week, you said you were waiting for Gareth to confirm whether there is a KEL for Calendar Square. Can you let me know? Kind regards, Lucy. Now, is that something that you recall raising with Gareth Jenkins at the time?
I don't recall it, no.
It seems as though you've told Ms. Bremner that that was something you were doing.
It seems likely that, yeah, possibly. Or she may have thought that I mean, it seemed to me from this email thread that I was talking to Gareth about other aspects of what they were looking at this point. So it may be that she thought I was waiting for him to confirm that as well, although that may not be the... I mean, it kind of seems more likely to me that I would have spoken to SSC about it rather than Gareth as to whether there was a KEL.
Why is that?
Because they're the custodians of that system. I suppose it is possible that, I mean, because we got into the point of whether... so I believe that Calendar Square was a Horizon issue rather than H&GX issue. So it seems possible that the KEL may have been deleted, but since Gareth was working there at the time, I suppose it's possible in theory that he may have had a local copy of it that hadn't been deleted. But I mean, that's speculating in some ways, and don't think that is the discussion I was having with him.
When you say a local copy, you mean stored on a laptop or...?
Indeed.
Thank you. Can we scroll up, please? So you say you contact John Simpkins, having been pressed again by Ms Bremner for an answer on this issue as to whether there exists a KEL for Calendar Square. So, John, I'm being asked if I can confirm if there was a KEL for the Calendar Square issue. Are you able to confirm that definitively, please? You can say, please see the attachment which describes it, points 1 to 4. It seems that it was a known issue that was fixed in S90. Do you recall what that is?
So that's a major release in Legacy Horizon?
A software release.
Correct, yeah.
And that in this context was of interest because it was brought up in connection with the West Byfleet case. If it was fixed and therefore the bug wouldn't arise again, would a KEL, had it existed, have been deleted? So did that reflect an understanding you had at the time about the processes relating to the deletion of KELs, or is this simply an assumption that you...
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it seems from the way I've asked the question that I didn't know that at the time, and that's why I was seeking clarification, yeah. I mean, I may have either started to suspect it or, yeah. I mean, logically, it seems possible, doesn't it? So again, bearing in mind the fact that this Calendar Square was a Legacy Horizon issue that related to riposte. So by the time we got into, several years into operation of H&GX, then it would have had no operational relevance any longer.
What was your understanding at this stage about Fujitsu's internal policy in relation to the retention or deletion of KELs?
In terms of KELs specifically, I don't know, but I would say that I think it shouldn't have been deleted.
That's your opinion as a document manager?
Yeah.
If we turn, please, to the first page, we can see, forgive me, at the bottom of the first page, we can see the initial response you received from John Simpkins on the 25th of September 2018. He says, Matthew, I've spent some time trying to track this down via the branch name, date range, release, problem description, etc. However, I've yet to find a matching KEL. I think the best fitting peak is, and he gives a reference, which is for the branch named, but the branch is in Falkirk. He references another peak, which has a good description of the problem, which is in the Escher product, fixed in the new version at S19. He then says, this KEL, J. Simpkins 338Q, appears to apply, which should have been in the extract supplied to you.
Mm-hmm. To them.
Forgive me, to them being to the Post Office's lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
If we scroll up to the middle of the page, please, we can see your response. You say, John, thanks for this. It looks like the KEL J. Simpkins 338Q no longer exists. It wasn't in the set that we sent them. Do KELs get deleted? So as you said before, some uncertainty on your part as to what the correct procedures were.
Yes.
And the response you received from John Simpkins, yes, KELs can get deleted. I will see if I can dig out the deleted KEL details. Or would you prefer that it is just stay as deleted? Presumably that was meant to read that it just stays as deleted.
I think so.
What did you understand Mr. Simpkins to mean when he wrote, would you prefer that it just stay as deleted?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really sure why he said that, but I think I'd interpret it in the same way that I guess anyone would, which is that, do you want me to not reveal it, I guess?
Essentially, was he asking you whether or not he should be concealing the existence of a deleted KEL, even if it could be retrieved?
It certainly does sound like that. I don't really know what his intention is, to be honest.
What did you make of that suggestion at the time?
I think that I wouldn't agree with doing that, and I don't think I did at the time, and I think that we didn't follow or even discuss following that proposal, as it were.
Just going back, please, to your email that you sent him, forgive me, on the 26th. In that you said it looks like that particular KEL no longer exists. Do you know how you established that? Namely, that the KEL no longer existed.
So again, as I said before, I would guess that was by looking it up in the repository of KELs that I now that I had on the SharePoint site, and possibly also looking in the SSC website at the KEL repository. So the fact that it had been deleted does mean that it would no longer exist. If you did a search in either of those places, you wouldn't find it.
And by deletion, did you understand at that stage that we were talking about data that was irretrievable?
I don't think that I was sure, because I think I was, as you can see here, that I wasn't even clear at that stage whether they could be deleted or not. So I'm not sure that I would have known what deleted meant necessarily. But you're right, there could be deletion but retrievable, or deletion but not retrievable.
But that's not something to which you addressed your mind at the time, you don't think?
Not immediately.
A short time later, so after confirming that he would make some inquiries and querying with you whether he should provide anything if he finds it, he writes to confirm that he has in fact retrieved the details of the deleted KEL. Is that correct?
Yes, it looks, that's what he says, yeah.
Could we please take a look at that email chain, which is at FUJ?
So sorry, just one sec. So I will see if I can dig out the deleted KEL details. So he's not actually at that stage saying that he has found it, I don't think.
No, forgive me.
Yeah.
We're going to move on
Sure.
to another chain. It's a different chain, so we don't see that reference to whether it should stay deleted.
Right.
This is at FUJ 00179 please, on page 2. So this is the same day, about an hour later, after the email that we've just looked at. He says to you, Matthew, I've managed to retrieve this from the deleted Horizon KELs table. And then he proceeds to, in the body of the email, he's copied and pasted the information that he's recovered in relation to that KEL. Now, so far as you're aware, from where have Mr. Simpkins retrieved this information?
From something called the deleted Horizon KELs table. I mean, that's all I knew at that stage.
And did you know where that table resided?
Not from that email, no. I mean, I think I found out later that it's somewhere within the SSC database.
Was this the first time that you became aware that there existed deleted Horizon KELs which could be retrieved by Fujitsu?
Yes, I think so.
Were you concerned to discover that there existed a repository of KELs of which you'd not previously been aware?
Well, I think the answer is yes, and I think from in the same email chain you can see me asking whether we've told WBD that before, and raising some issues around the fact that we have now effectively some more KELs that we haven't previously referred to.
We'll come to that. We're just saying where we are for now. It would have occurred to you, would it not, that the previous assurance which you had given to Womble Bond Dickinson about having provided all historic and current KELs was incorrect?
I'm not sure that it did occur to me immediately in the context of the EDQ, no. I mean, this is like several months later, isn't it?
Sorry, not in the context of the EDQ, but you were asked by Womble Bond Dickinson to give a specific assurance that you had disclosed all historic and current KELs. And on the basis of what John Simpkins had told you, you confirmed that was correct. I think you confirmed that was correct.
Yes. Yes, correct, yeah.
Now, what I'm saying is, it would have occurred to you, wouldn't it, that if there existed deleted KELs which could be retrieved, you had not, in fact, provided all historic and current KELs to the Post Office's lawyers?
Correct, yeah. So again, well, I mean, I don't think it occurred to me in terms of that statement, but I think I go on to raise that question in this chain.
We will come to it.
Yeah.
Did you go back to Womble Bond Dickinson to notify them that your earlier assurance about the disclosure of all historic and current CALs was wrong?
Well, again, I think not immediately, but then I think we discuss it in this email chain, and then I think eventually we do go back and tell them that. Again, I don't know about specifically referring back to that email in which they asked that question and got that response, but I think we did provide them.
Well, let's look now at how the issue was handled by you and your colleagues. We're on the same document, please, at page 1. At the bottom of that page, we see, thank you, forgive me. Yes, sorry, so this is your email to Dave Ibbott. Could you just confirm his role, please?
So Dave Ibbott was a project manager, a Fujitsu project manager, who had been tasked with helping to project manage this exercise, basically.
He was someone with whom you worked. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So he was supporting you in effect in the management of requests for information from the post office's
correct.
Office.
Yeah.
There's also Pete Newsome and John Simpkins. So this is following on from John's email to you. Is that right?
I believe so.
And if we scroll down, please, sorry, slightly, we can see. Thank you. So you're forwarding John's email now, copying in Pete Newsome and Dave Ibbott.
Yeah.
You say, please. Pete, in looking into Lucy Bremer's questions about whether there is a CAL for Calendar Square, John has identified 2 peaks which he believes describe the same issue, even if they were not raised in direct relation to that same branch. And from that, a CAL, which has been deleted and was therefore not in the set of CALs that we have shared with Womble Bond Dickinson. John has managed to retrieve the content of the CAL as shown in the email below. When, in brackets, if I share this CAL, or indeed the peaks, since they reference the CAL, I'll need to raise the subject of there being CALs which have been deleted. Is that okay? Have we previously mentioned to them that there are deleted CALs? If we have to explain that, then I suppose we need to know why. John, do you know the criteria? Was this a horizon-only CAL that once fixed by S80 or once superseded by HNGX was no longer required? Now, here you appear to be considering the possibility that you would not share the CAL and the associated peaks with the Post Office's lawyers. Is that fair?
It is fair to say that. I mean, I think when I wrote this email, I was assuming that we were going to share it, hence when. And then I think I considered that someone else may have a different view, bearing in mind that Pete Newsome is effectively the manager of this exercise, and he may have taken a different view. So it's, in a way, not really my decision, but I think I'm pretty clear that it's going to happen, actually.
So your evidence is essentially you're looking to Pete for direction on how to deal with it.
Yes.
Did you consider that providing relevant information to the Post Office was optional? Was your own view that it was optional?
I don't think it was, no.
You do express here some concern that the existence of deleted CALs appears to be inconsistent with information you've already provided to the Post Office's lawyers. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
If we scroll up to the top of the page, please, we can see the first response you received to your query from Pete Newsome. He says, Matthew, I think we should send to Womble Bond Dickinson saying how we identified the CAL and that it was deleted from the database by John. Sorry, it says by John, but presumably should read but John was able to find a copy on a local drive, Pete. So what Mr. Newsome appears to say is, yes, we do disclose the deleted CAL. Is that fair?
Yes.
But by way of explanation for the late disclosure, he suggests that you tell Womble Bond Dickinson that it was found on a local drive.
Yes.
Did you consider that statement to be true?
No, because I think John had, I think in his email beneath this, he had said that he'd found it in the deleted table. And I think I probably had a discussion with him in which he said that it was a table within the database. So that to me would immediately sound like it wasn't a local drive, but was a table within the SSC website somewhere.
From where do you think Mr. Newsom obtained the information that John had been able to find a copy on a local drive?
I think, well, I mean, I can only assume he's making an incorrect assumption.
Do you think it's possible that that was simply made up by Mr. Newsom to avoid any further questions about deleted Kells?
It's possible.
Please could we look at the response you received from John Simpkins to your query about why the Kell had been deleted. This can be found in a separate chain, please, at FUJ 00179952. Thank you. At the bottom of that first page, please, we can see an email from John Simpkin dated 26th of September, in which he says, in answer to your question, yes, I would expect that once S90 was released, that proved that this was fixed, the Kell was deleted. So obviously some grammatical errors there, but essentially saying it was his expectation that it was deleted once the release was thought to have fixed the problem. Is that fair?
Yes, well, he's saying it looks like he's assuming that. He doesn't know that for a fact. But
he's making an assumption.
Yeah.
Do you know why Mr. Simpkins would be making an assumption rather than knowing the reason for the deletion of the Kell?
I mean, I think unless somebody had made a note as to why the Kell was deleted, then there wouldn't be any other explanation recorded anywhere. So I think he's kind of logically deducing that is almost certainly the case, in his opinion.
If we scroll up to the top of that first page, please, we now see a further instruction from Pete Newsom. So very shortly after the email we looked at earlier, in which he suggested providing an explanation about a local drive, he now says, Matthew, include this as to why we deleted the Kell. Now, this explanation didn't rely on a purported discovery of the Kell in a local drive, but upon an assumption that Mr. Simpkins had made that the Kell had been deleted. Is that fair?
So that's two separate things, though, isn't it?
Forgive me, I'm saying, so we've moved on from the original explanation, which was...
So one of them is how he found it, and the other one was why it was there. Is that what you're asking?
No, forgive me, I'm simply making the point that here, a short time later, he's advancing a further explanation. But forgive me, he's instructing you to give a different explanation as to why the Kell had been, as to why the deleted Kell had been discovered.
Well, no, I'm saying that's two separate things, though, isn't it? So the reason it's been discovered is not the same as the reason it was deleted.
Forgive me.
Yeah, he's providing the reason why it was deleted, not how or why it was found.
But that providing an explanation as to why it wasn't disclosed in the first place. Isn't that the underlying...
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the fact that it was deleted is the reason that it wasn't disclosed in the first place, not why it was deleted, though. I mean, why it was deleted in some ways could be another reason, couldn't it? But it's connected, but it's not the same thing.
No, I agree with that. But it's all part of, is it not, an attempt to explain away why Fujitsu's discovered a Kell that wasn't previously disclosed?
I guess so, yeah.
This is the explanation which you provided to Womble Bond Dickinson, is it not, when you handed over the deleted KEL? Do you recall that?
The explanation as to why it was deleted, I believe that is what I told them.
Can we look at FUJ 00159985? Thank you. Your email is at the bottom of page 1 onto page 2. Thank you. So it's dated 28th of September. You say, Lucy, we've looked into this and it appears that the relevant peaks are, give the references, the copies attached. The 2 related KELs were deleted due to the fact that the S90 release was proven to have fixed the issue, and so they were not included in the sets of KELs which you have. We've been able to retrieve the text from one of them, presumably read, however, as attached, and you provide that KEL J. Simpkins 338Q. Now, in this email, you assert as fact that the 2 related KELs had been deleted because it was shown the issue had been fixed by a software release, do you not?
Yes.
You didn't know whether that was in fact the reason why they'd been deleted, did you?
Well, I was given that explanation by John Simpkins and assumed, therefore, that it was true, since that was his view. And I'm not sure what other explanation. I mean,
I think the point, forgive me, the point I'm trying to make is you had an assumption that he'd made, and you accepted that that was an assumption, and you assert it here as fact.
Okay, yes.
If you were being entirely accurate, you would have said, we don't know why they were deleted, but we assume it was because the problem had been fixed by a software release, would you not?
I could have stated it in that way. I'm not sure that it was clear to me how sure John Simpkins was of that, his view. So, I mean,
if he wasn't sure of his view,
well,
how could you be
I'm not sure that I had any particular reason to doubt it. So you're right, though. Maybe this is overstated in terms of sounding like it's 100% certainty.
Were you hoping to shut down any further inquiries into the existence of deleted KELs?
I don't think so. No. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure that I would have had any interest in doing that.
Do you think you were being entirely transparent in the explanation that you gave?
I think possibly more information could have been given, but I mean, to be honest, I thought I was being helpful and providing them with an answer to the question that they had given. I mean, to be honest, I just don't think it's of no interest to me to hide whether there were deleted KELs or not. It makes no difference to me.
Would you be concerned, though, about the reputation of Fujitsu and how it had handled the disclosure of KELs to date?
Not really.
2 weeks later, you receive a number of queries from Womble Bond Dickinson about the deletion of KELs. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Could we take a look at that email, please, at FUJ 00181400? Thank you. If we could scroll down, please, to page 4. Thank you. So this is an email for the 11th of October from Lucy Bremner. She says, Matthew, we've sent the 2 KELs for Calendar Square to our IT experts. They've come back with the following questions for you relating to KELs being deleted when the corresponding issues are fixed. She then lists 4 questions. Firstly, is that procedure a general rule? If so, is it enshrined in a formal process? Thirdly, if so, which, and do we have the corresponding documentation? Fourthly, are all deleted KELs available in a searchable archive? I assume that text could, in principle, be retrieved from other KELs. She asks for an urgent response because they are having a call with the experts that morning. Now, you refer these queries to John Simpkins, is that right?
I think so.
And it appears you carry out some research yourself into the processes for deletion of CELs, is that right?
I think so.
On the basis of that research and the responses you receive from Mr. Simpkins, you respond to Ms. Bremer. We can see that response, please, at FUJ 00160063. At page 2, please. So we see a list of the original questions and your responses in bold. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
In square brackets, you've written Matthew Lenton to indicate you're the author of the text.
Yes.
So you answer the first 2 questions in the affirmative. That's
Yes.
correct. The third, you provide some documentation that you've managed to source. Is that from Dimensions?
Correct.
And finally, the fourth question about whether or not deleted CELs are searchable and can be retrieved. You state they're not text searchable in their current location, but all deleted CELs can potentially be retrieved, although this would require additional time and effort to do, after which those retrieved would then be searchable. It's believed all deleted CELs are still in the archive table. Now, from where had you obtained that information?
Almost undoubtedly from John Simpkins.
Did you make any specific inquiries with Mr. Simpkins as to whether or not all deleted CELs could in fact be retrieved?
Well, I was going to say, I think it transpires later on that that's not correct, and that there were deleted CELs that were retrievable and deleted CELs that were not retrievable.
Thank you. We'll come on to that shortly. Now, you receive, I think within minutes of sending this response to Womble Bond Dickinson, you receive a further email asking you to confirm how many CELs have been deleted.
Right.
Is that right?
I think so.
We can look at that, please. FUJ 00160063. I think that may be where we are anyway. On the first page, please. Thank you. So she follows up with that query, which you refer to John Simpkins, please, at FUJ 00181400. Thank you. So at the bottom of the first page, please, we can see your email to John Simpkins. John, do you know how many CELs have been deleted to date? That's Womble Bond Dickinson's questions for now. Are you able to provide an answer, please? I think I know what's coming next. What did you mean by that?
Well, once we tell them, they'll ask for all of them.
We can see Mr. Simpkins' response in the middle of the page, please, at 1601. He says, Horizon deleted CELs, there are 1,281. And Horizon, or HNGX, Horizon Online deleted CELs, 212. He goes on to say, please note, however, that some CELs would have been deleted because they were wrongly raised, as well as those out of date. So we cannot confirm that all the information in these is valid, i.e., if the SMC raised a CEL wrongly, the SSC may well have deleted it as such. Therefore, I have reservations about supplying an export of deleted CELs. What we appear to see here, do we not, is some reluctance by John Simpkins to consent to the disclosure of the deleted CELs. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely clear what he means about reservations. I mean, I don't know whether he means reluctance to supply them at all, or just those are his reservations in that there may well be a significant number of deleted CELs that are actually not valid as CELs at all. I mean, I think I recall there was fairly regular problem with SMC raising KELs for which there were already KELs. So you would end up with a duplicate. And I think he's referring to those also being included in that set. So it's possible that his reservation is more about we can't just send the whole load over because some of them just simply aren't valid and never were.
I think it transpires in early November, you do provide a tranche of deleted KELs, 1,491,
Right.
in response to their request. Do you recall that?
I believe so, yeah.
Now, in early February 2019, you received several queries from Womble Bond Dickinson, which were prompted by the claimant's technical expert. Do you have any recollection?
I'm sure I do, if you show me
Yes, of course.
more specifically what we're talking about.
That email is at FUJ0008678, please. Thank you. Page 3, please. If we could scroll down, please, to the bottom of page 3. Thank you. So this is, thank you, 6th of February from Lucy Bremner. She says, Matthew, Jason Coyne, who was the claimant's technical expert, do you recall him as such?
Yes, yep.
Has referred to a number of peaks and KELs in his supplemental report that he states have not been disclosed. Can you let me know why they are not in the peak KEL extracts we've received from you? Is it because they were all from the system Pinnacle? If you can provide any dates relating to them, that would be appreciated. And we can see here you've again adopted the method of putting your responses in the body of the email in bold. You refer, in relation to the KELs, you say several of them are deleted, not deactivated, and they cannot be retrieved. Now that, of course, it was different to what you'd said previously, which was that you'd understood them all to be retrievable.
Yes, although, as I say, later it transpired that some deleted KELs were not retrievable. I'm not quite clear whether this is before or after that statement. I mean, I think you can see from this that there's a kind of lack of knowledge on my part about about the status of deleted KELs.
If we go to page 2, please.
Yes.
Forgive me, sir, I may have an erroneous reference, and in any event, I think we're due to give the transcriber a break. So I wonder if we could please briefly break now. I'll make sure I have the correct reference when we come back, and I can take Mr. Lenton to the relevant email.
Certainly. When you say briefly, do you mean we take a 15-minute afternoon break, or just a...
Yes, please.
Yeah, fine.
Our regular break, thank you.
Yeah, fine. So it's 10 to 3 now, so 3:05?
Thank you, sir, yes. Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for the time. The reference, please, is FUJ 0008678. Mr. Lenton, you mentioned more than once in your evidence there was some ambiguity in the terminology used. but that you did clarify that in an email to Womblebond Dickinson. This is your email of the 13th, well, it's Ms. Prime's email of the 13th of February. We can see at the very top there, you confirm that you've inserted your comments into the body of the email,
Yes.
as you've done on previous occasions. So if we scroll down, please, to Ms. Prime's email, where we have her questions and your answers in bold. The first related to the Pinnacle system, which was the predecessor to Peak, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And the second point relating to deleted CALs. She asks, are these not retrievable? Or were they provided to us on the 5th of November 2018? So this is triggered by some confusion as to whether or not deleted CALs were or were not retrievable.
Yes.
You explained there are two categories. Firstly, deleted CALs that are no longer retrievable because they've been completely deleted. You said this was before the SC started saving them into a deleted table. And I think you said in your evidence that's not something which you would approve of from a document management perspective. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
You say these cannot be provided, and if a CAL is referred to by us as not being retrievable, and I believe all CALs that are referred to in the claimant's expert's report as not having been disclosed fall into this category. So deleted CALs that you cannot retrieve. The other category of deleted CALs are those which are retrievable due to being deleted into a deleted table, to which Mr. Simpkins originally referred you in response to the Calendar Square bug query. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
You go on to confirm that that is the set of CALs that have been provided to the Post Office's lawyers in November of 2018. We then have another category which you describe as deactivated CALs. She says these were provided to us in the extract in March. Were these provided, in the extract in March or November? You say these are CALs that have not been deleted into the deleted table, but are excluded from the SSC's default searches, which focus on live CALs. They can be included easily by changing the search criteria, and they formed part of the original March batch. So those were presumably the historic CALs that you did provide in March 2018. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And then a fourth category is deprecated CALs. Is that the correct
Yep.
pronunciation? She says these were provided to us in the extract in March or 5th of November 2018. So asking, have we had them? You say when a CAL is updated, the old version of that same CAL is deprecated. So these are superseded versions of live or deactivated CALs. We've only provided the most recent versions, so we've not separately provided these superseded versions. Note that there are no deprecated versions of CALs in the category 2A, that being CALs which were deleted prior to the introduction of the deleted CAL table and which fall within your definition of irretrievable. Is that right?
Correct.
The final category she has are live CALs. You confirm these were provided in March, and you confirm when she says, are there any other CALs? No. All CALs are covered by categories 2 to 5 above. Now, the fourth category of deprecated CALs,
Yes.
this was another category of historic CALs which hadn't been disclosed. Is that right?
So rather than using the word historic CALs, because that has possibly the implication that they're no longer current CALs, so deprecated CALs could be just superseded versions of any CALs that exist.
So both current and historic.
Well, I'm assuming that deactivated CALs could be regarded as historic, but from what it says here, there would be deprecated or superseded versions of those.
Of the deactivated ones.
Yeah, as well as the live ones, yeah, of course.
Now, as earlier iterations of either a current or a deactivated CAL, these were earlier iterations. That's essentially the point you're making.
Yes.
And they would have contained information relating to the symptoms of the fault, its underlying causes, the solution, and related peaks, would it not?
Possibly.
being consistent with what we see in other CAL
Yeah.
documents.
Mhm.
And if they contain that information, would they not have provided valuable evidence about the detection, diagnosis and remedial action which had been taken previously in response to the
Potentially,
possible?
yes. I mean, bearing in mind, of course, that the most recent versions were provided.
The current versions.
Yeah.
Now, I think the point you make later is that here in this email, perhaps not advertising, but you are drawing to the attention of the Post Office's lawyers that there is yet a further category which Fujitsu holds, which hasn't been disclosed.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, as I'm sure you're leading to, this already is contrary to what was stated in the EDQ. Yeah.
So we come then to a further query in late September 2019, and this relates to the accuracy of the electronic document questionnaire. Do you recall that being raised with you by the Post Office's lawyers?
I do. Did you just tell me the date just then?
This is late September.
Yeah, I mean, it was after this email, isn't it?
So
I believe.
that chain, please, is FUJ 001666835.
Yeah. So it's considerably after that last email, in fact, isn't it, I think?
Yes, thank you. Please, pages 9 to 10, bottom of page 9 onto page 10, please. Sorry, if we scroll down, please, a little further, we'll have the original email from Ms. Bremner. Thank you. So that's 30th of September 2019. She says, Matthew, Post Office is seeking to quote from its electronic documents questionnaire submitted back in 2017. It's seeking to rely on the following quote in relation to CELS. And that's the passage, of course, to which we looked at earlier. So can you confirm this is definitely the correct position? We need to respond to Freeths. Now, your response a little further up, unsurprisingly, was that that was not entirely correct. You say the second sentence is not correct, that being that previous entries versions of the current entries are no longer available. You say you may recall that there are 3 status categories of CEL: current, deprecated, and deleted. For those that are current or deprecated, they've been updated in such a way that previous content is not permanently overwritten, but instead a new version is created, with the previous versions being retained and accessible. For those that have been deleted, only the last version at the point of deletion has been retained. Now, you had disclosed a batch of deleted CELs in November. That's correct, isn't it? We'd covered that.
Yes.
But you hadn't disclosed any of the CELs falling into the deprecated category.
That's correct, yeah.
Do you recall how many deprecated CELs existed?
I believe a figure of something like 5,000.
Could we please turn to FUJ 001666835? Thank you. So this is in early October. You've been asked to provide an entirely fresh extraction of CELs, is that correct?
Yes.
And here you provide a breakdown of the different categories. We see there against deprecated CELs there were 6,155, is that right?
Right.
Does that sound correct?
Yes.
And is that the number of CELs which were disclosed by Fujitsu after the conclusion of the Horizon Issues trial?
That's the total number of new documents that were disclosed, yeah. Because it says that there were 14,365 disclosed, of which about 8,000, 9,000 had already been disclosed.
I think you've accepted that these 6,155 documents might have provided valuable evidence about the detection, diagnosis, and remedial action taken to address known errors in the system. Is that right?
Potentially.
I'd like to move on to a new topic, please, which relates to your knowledge of and information which you provided about remote access. In your statement, you say you were not aware until the group litigation that Fujitsu staff had the ability to insert transaction data into branch accounts without the express knowledge or consent of a sub-postmaster. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
It appears from the documents we have that this issue was brought to your attention in or around May 2018 because of a request for information made by the claimant's technical expert. Is that
Right, I think so.
If we look, please, at FUJ 00 222620. Now, I think, please, if we could scroll to the very bottom of that document, we see the original request from Womble Dickinson. Thank you. So this is just for reference. This was the genesis of the request that came in, request for information from the claimant's expert. You were asked, were you not, to identify documents which were responsive to that request?
Yes.
One of the topics covered by the claimant's expert in his request for information was remote access. Do you recall that?
I believe so, yeah.
I wonder, please, if we could show the information request. It bears the reference FUJ 222364. Thank you. The relevant section relating to remote access, please, is on page 2 under the heading in relation to issue 7. Forgive me, this contains the comments. It will be the following page. Thank you. If we scroll down, please, in relation to 7. Thank you. So question 1.13, the claimant's expert asked, when Fujitsu accessed branch accounts to modify or insert data, can it be described what the need for that access was and what modifications were performed? Can it be confirmed how many times this occurred? Now we can see some small boxes with the letters and numbers J9, J10, J11. Do you recall what they were?
So I think these are comments by Jonathan Gribben from WBD.
Thank you. So just dealing first with question 1.13, essentially what you're being asked there is what records you hold, or what records Fujitsu hold, indicating for what reason and how often Fujitsu had inserted data into branch accounts. Is that fair?
Right, yes.
Thank you. Could we scroll down, please, to the following page? Forgive me, and one on, please. Thank you. So the other questions relating to remote access, 1.14 to 1.16. 1.14 states, can it be described what privileges and capabilities administrators had in relation to branch remote access and the relevant processes and procedures? And 1.15, please describe how transaction amendments, including reversals and balancing transactions, can be identified for those which are not carried out by the SPM in the audit transaction data logs. Now, if we could just please briefly look at the comments on the following page. These are comments from the Post Office's lawyers. J14 and J15 indicate their understanding that the query relates both to balancing transactions and privileged user access. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I think it's right, is it not? You took steps to identify documents which you understood to be responsive to those requests. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
And you also sought information from a subject matter expert, which in this case was Stephen Parker. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
Let's look briefly at that exchange, please. It can be found at FUJ00 222620. Thank you. Your email to Mr. Parker can be found at the top of page 2, please. Thank you. It's dated the 24th of May, 2018. You explained to him the documents which you've attached to your email. They comprise the request for information, which we just looked at, as well as a table of documents that you'd prepared that you understood to be responsive to the request. Does that sound right?
Yes.
You then say this, the third paragraph, questions 1.13 to 1.16 all relate to issues around remote access to the live system and corrections. Something I've tried to point out is that there are two different processes, both named transaction correction. One is the TPS POL finance system corrections generated wholly within POL, which are delivered via the file described in, you state the reference. I understand this happens regularly. The other is the transaction correction tool, which is described in, you state document reference, which happens very rarely, in brackets once, question mark. This is where I'm getting referred to SSC. Are you able to provide additional information in response to the questions in the comments labelled Jonathan G for 1.13 to 1.16? Are there logs of it being requested, being done? What's the procedure for authorising and doing it? Now, in that section we've just read, you identify two tools by which corrections can be made to branch accounts. The first is in the Post Office's back-end accounting systems. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And the second being a transaction correction tool developed for the use in Horizon Online.
Yes.
You don't make any mention there of privileged access rights. Is that fair?
I don't know.
Why is that?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm simply not commenting on it. I mean, I suppose it's sort of covered by the last sentence in that paragraph in a way, since that includes asking about the procedure for authorising and doing it.
Were you aware at that stage of what those rights were and what they entailed?
I don't think so.
You received a response from Mr. Parker on the 25th of May. If we scroll back to the top of the first page of this document, please. Thank you. He says, Matthew, starter for 10 as follows. In response to that first query question 1.13, he states there is no functionality in Horizon for either a branch, post office or Fujitsu to modify or remove transaction data once it's been recorded in a branch's accounts. It's only possible to post auditable correction transactions to a branch's accounts. He then states, in the very rare circumstances where an accounting error cannot be corrected by POL's use of a TC, transaction correction, presumably, and it is necessary for support to make such a correction, it's been subject to whatever change approval process is in use at that time. Currently MSC, what is that referring to, please?
That's a system, it stands for Managed Service Change, so that's a change control system in Fujitsu.
And latterly OCP, which was?
Operational Change, struggling to remember what the P stands for, proposal, sorry, that's right.
These systems will contain full details of the required correction, method of execution, approval, etc. Now, to which tools or methods of access did you understand Mr. Parker to be referring here?
When he says these systems, you mean?
Yes.
So he's referring to MSC or OCP?
But specifically, what MSC and OCP were not tools, were they, to make to insert data into a branch account?
Okay, so sorry, you're asking about
The method.
the methodology.
Not the record.
Okay, sure.
To what method did you understand him to be referring?
So he's talking about the balancing transaction, so the H&GX tool that is referred to, the second one referred to in my previous email. So he's saying not the poll TC.
And you didn't understand him to be referring to privileged access rights?
He's not overtly referring to that, is he? But quiet correction, execution approvals. He's not. But again, I think it's kind of, in his mind, I'm sure it's contained in that last sentence where he talks about approvals, etc. So, yeah, he's not explicitly referring to it, though, I agree.
Did you make any further inquiries with him at this stage, do you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
The issue of remote access arose again in January 2019, so quite some time later, when the Post Office's lawyers requested disclosure of logs relating to the auditing of privileged user access.
Right.
Do you have any recollection of that?
I think so, yeah.
And if we could look, please, at FUJ 0001881447. Thank you. Pages 5 and on to page 6, we can see the original request, please. Thank you. So it arose in connection with, I think on this occasion, the evidence of Torsten Godseth, and it was a query relating to managed service change, which we saw referenced in Mr. Parker's previous email, and to what we call sign-off documents. What were they, please?
Well, managed service change involves a method of proposing and planning a change to a live system, and then sign-off means somebody approving it.
So these were, it was suggested at the time, these were provided an audit log of the use of privileged access. Is that fair?
Correct, yeah. They're like a manual audit log, though, so somebody actually
requires
filling
an individual
Yeah,
to...
correct.
Now, is it right, you carried out some inquiries to locate relevant logs of the type we see here, the managed service change logs? Do you recall doing that?
I think so, yeah.
Searching the system, which produced only 9 positive results. If we scroll up, please, to page 3.
I think so. Yeah, I think I recall this, yeah.
Thank you. So you email Mr. Parker, Mr. Ibbett and Mr. Godseth to say that you've, I think, run some searches on the MSC data archive, and this has produced, there are 10 listed, you say, that match the search that you've run, the last one being the only MSC with AppSup in its title. That
right.
being the application support privileged access, is that right?
Yep, correct.
You then cite one of the logs entitled Live Remote Access to AppSup Database Role from SSE Users. You say that one isn't relevant. That leaves 9 examples, 5 of which are from 2010. You're saying to Mr. Parker, Mr. Ibbett, Mr. Godseth, does that sound realistically like it might be all there are? So 9 instances of manually recording the use of the access right. If we scroll up a bit, please. You have a response back from Mr. Parker, in which he says, for the use of AppSup with full MSCs, that's a reasonable number, but I'm surprised the search is not throwing up any subtasks. Can you translate that for us, please?
I think so, yeah. So I think there's a concept within MSC of having an individual MSC for a task or a change, and then there's also having I think it's called possibly a master MSC, so where it's effectively an MSC covering off a whole series of separate but possibly identical or similar tasks that are carried out under that authorization. I think that's what it's referring to.
And he then cites an example of where he's found such a subtask, is that right?
I think that's right.
Which
yeah.
hasn't been picked up by your search of the MSC logs?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So, yes, indeed.
And if we scroll down to the bottom of his email, he says, not sure if this is an issue with the data set or the search method. That is to say, he's not agreeing that 9 could be the right number.
It sounds
and
like
he's querying
yes.
why it is that your search has thrown up that number.
Yeah.
I think you then carried out some further searches, is that right? In which you established additional 61 instances in which the privilege access rights have been used, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
When you referred those results back to Mr. Parker,
Yeah.
he suggested again that that appeared to be low, did he not?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Could we please take a look at his response and the reasons which he gives? That's at page 1, please, of this document. So it's in the middle of the page, please. Mr. Parker's email of the 4th of January. He says, it still seems low. The trouble is the systems were not designed for this kind of retrospective interrogation and just don't support it. There is no tag on an incident or change control which classifies the kind of remedial action needed. The description of any remedial action can be in a number of places. And then he cites 2 examples of how a user might have recorded the use of the tool but not done so explicitly. Is that fair?
Correct, yeah.
He says, I think we need to give the claimants the results of this search whilst A, clearly telling them the criteria used to search, and B, caveating that we do not believe it is complete and that it is not practical to return a complete list because they would require applying a Mark 1 eyeball to all 220,000 peaks. What did you understand, Mr. Parker, to mean by applying a Mark 1 eyeball to all 220,000?
I think he means somebody is going to have to literally look at each one of them to determine whether that role was used in order to close out that peak or as part of that peak. I mean, I think generally my understanding of this is that when he says there is no tag which classifies the kind of remedial action needed, he means there isn't a tick box, for example, that says use apps up, tick, and therefore you'd be able to retrieve them all easily knowing that it had been used.
And so unless somebody went through each one of the peaks, you couldn't say definitively...
That's my understanding of what he's saying, yeah.
How many times it had been used or why?
Correct.
And what had been done with it?
Yes.
3 days later, you respond to Mr. Parker. It appears following a conversation with the Post Office's lawyers, and we see that, please, at the very top of this page. So you say, Steve, I think you're right. We haven't yet covered off the MSC question, despite what Johnny just said. Can you confirm the reference to Johnny is?
Jonathan Gribben from WBD.
You then say, below is where we are up to in the discussion. As he said he is happy, shall we let it lie for a bit and see if it comes up again? Or shall we provide what we've worked out below? Now, in his earlier email, Mr. Parker had stated that the results ought to be disclosed, but that the disclosure should be accompanied by a caveat as to the scope of the searches that have been carried out. Is that fair?
Yeah.
By contrast, here you're suggesting that it might be better simply to let it lie for a bit in the hope that the issue goes away. Is that fair?
I'm not sure I'm saying it might be better. I'm just offering him, basically, I'm asking him to make the decision on what we do.
Were you concerned that the response which Mr. Parker had provided raised more questions than it answered?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I must admit, the thing that is missing from this email that I don't recollect is what Johnny just said. So I'm assuming it's a phone call that we've just been involved with. So I don't know what was actually said, and it could, yeah, I just don't know.
The implication seems to be that he's not pressing you for an answer.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
And so the opportunity is taken to let the issue slide.
I guess I'm offering that as a possibility to Steve Parker, yeah, but I'm asking him to make the decision.
Now, approximately 2 months later, you received a further query from WBD concerning the ability of SEC users to grant themselves privileged access without prior authorization. Could we look at that, please, at FUJ 000897898? Thank you. It's on page 2, please. We can see the original request. So this one's from Andrew Parsons, a partner at Womblebond Dickinson. He says a follow-up question on AppSup, which I think may be for Dave Haywood. Who was Dave Haywood, please?
So he is he was and is the lead security architect at Fujitsu for Post Office account.
He says, I've attached the relevant peak. Could Dave or someone at Fujitsu explain why it took 4 years for this issue to get resolved? We suspect that C's, a reference to the claimants, will attack Fujitsu on this peak, saying that Fujitsu knew SSC had more access permissions than they should have had, and that Fujitsu were dilatory in fixing that issue. Is there an explanation for why it took so long that would be good, or an explanation for why it doesn't matter that it took so long? If we look at your response to that query, please, on page 1. Thank you. So that's dated the 8th of March 2019. You begin by clarifying what appear to be some contradictory statements that you and your colleague, Mr. Ibbott, had made. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you go on to say this. This is the second paragraph under points 1 and 2. The ability for SSC users to switch themselves into the AppSup role without prior authorization was removed from existing users in August 2016. As to the reasons why this took so long, we don't have an explanation for the delay between the recognition of the preference for removing the role from being a permanent role for SEC and that change actually being executed. 2 things to note about the relevant peak, however, are firstly, that was not originally raised in order to cover off this particular issue, and that original purpose of the peak was indeed closed off. Secondly, that it appears that it was closed incorrectly, so that it, instead of it being routed to Unix DBA as suggested by the penultimate entry, it was instead closed. Following an audit in August 2016, a new peak was raised in order to follow up the task to remove the AppSup role. Finally, you say, as has been stated on previous occasions, even when SSC had the ability to switch into the role themselves, it was always a conscious decision to do so. So the role was never a permanently applied state, and the switch into it was always audited. What did you mean when you said that the switch into it was always audited?
So presumably that it's recorded that they've used that permission or that role.
You had established, had you not, in your earlier discussions with Stephen Parker, that you, in fact, had no way of accurately establishing how often the role had been used without reviewing every single peak?
That sounds correct. Yeah, although, yeah, I'm not sure what happened in between that and this, so there may have been some other discussion about it.
But are you not here giving false assurance that the use of the right is fully audited and can be accounted for?
It's, yeah, on the face of it, yes. I mean,
When in
I'm sure
fact you knew that that wasn't the case?
I suppose so, yes.
Now, you received a further query from Womble Dickinson in early March 2019 concerning the accuracy of the evidence provided by Stephen Parker. Do you recall that?
Not immediately, but
That reference is FUJ 0008978, please. Could we go to page 9, please? Forgive me, sir. I think on this occasion I do have the wrong reference. So if I have an opportunity, I'll return to it. But we'll leave the subject of Mr. Parker's evidence for the moment, please.
All right.
My next topic, please, is the preparation of witness evidence. Please, could you describe your role in the preparation of witness statements provided by Fujitsu employees?
my role, yeah, so similar to what we've seen in the rest of the work that I did on this, it's largely around assisting people with finding information, answering questions, or helping to answer questions or find information for to answer questions put by WBD.
Do you recall whether you had input into the drafting of statements?
I don't believe that I did, but there are questions that I'm asked which I then obtain information for, which end up probably going into the statement. So arguably you could say that I did, but I mean, I wasn't actively involved in actually deciding what they would say, I don't think.
I'd like to ask you some questions about the wording of a statement provided by Andy Dunks in the group litigation, please.
Yep.
Do you recall being asked to obtain a witness statement for the Post Office's lawyers concerning the extraction of audit data?
So I must admit, I didn't recall it until you disclosed the emails to me in the last couple of days.
Do you know why the request was directed to you?
Not really, no. I mean, only in that many of the requests did come through to me, and it's possibly just one that I was able to answer. I'm not quite sure now.
Do you recall providing a draft statement to Womble Dickinson now that you've read those emails?
So the draft statement in this case, I believe, was the standard ARQ witness statement. So it was effectively like a templated statement used by the security operations team.
From where had you obtained that draft statement?
I think it was provided to me by Jason Muir.
Did you know by whom the standard form of words had been drafted?
No.
And did you know in what context that statement had been prepared?
If I didn't, I may not have known at that time, but I mean, since then, I do have an understanding of what it's for. but I can't recall whether that was the first time that I was aware of it or not.
Could we please look at the wording, some of the wording contained in that statement at FUJ 00160508? Thank you. This is a copy of the draft statement which you provided to the lawyers of the Post Office, is that right?
Yes.
We can see it's dated the 13th of November 2018. So that's, I think, just the day before you provided it. So presumably you inserted that date.
I'm not sure. Possibly not.
Just to orient ourselves, please, if we look at the first paragraph of the draft statement, it reads, I've been employed by Fujitsu Services Limited on the Post Office account since the 11th of March 2002 as an information technology security analyst responsible for audit data, extractions and IT security. I have working knowledge of the computer system known as Horizon, which is a computerized accounting system used by Post Office Limited. I'm authorized by Fujitsu Services Limited to undertake extractions of audit, archive data and to obtain information regarding system transactions recorded on the Horizon system. Now, the statement goes on to provide an explanation of the Horizon system, as well as the what might be described as controls around the extraction of data. Is that correct?
I think so.
The section of the statement I'd like to ask you about can be found at the bottom of page 4, please, and on to page 5. So thank you. The last two paragraphs read, a request was received on the 3rd of October 2018 and asked for information in connection with the post offices at Caddington, Spencefield, Newport and Fleckney. I undertook extractions of data held on the Horizon system and followed the procedures outlined above. I produced a CD containing the required data. Now, was that information that you inserted? Do you recall?
No, I don't think so. I think that WBD specified what they were asking for, and this was basically inserted in order to provide the information requested. Whether I inserted that in there or not, I don't know. It may well have been Jason Muir.
It goes on to say, there is no reason to believe that the information in this statement is inaccurate because of improper use of the system. To the best of my knowledge and belief, at all material times, the system was operating properly, or if not, any respect in which it was not operating properly or was out of operation was not such as to affect the information held within it. What did you understand that statement to mean?
So my understanding of that is that it's referring to the audit retrieval system.
When it refers to the system was operating properly?
Yeah.
You didn't understand it to be a generalized comment about the integrity of the Horizon system?
No.
After providing this initial draft, you liaised with Womble Bond Dickinson to clarify the wording of the statement. Do you agree with that?
I believe so.
And you proposed some amendments. You can look at the email
did
chain. It's at FUJ 001606449, please. Thank you. If we could go down to page 2, please. to the bottom of that page, please. So here, this is just one example, but here you say, Lucy, section now reads as follows and attached, and you propose effectively some amended wording to the paragraph we just looked at. Does it need to be signed today, or can that be done on Monday?
Right.
Now, was that redrafting done by you or by someone else?
So I think it's I think there's another, either below this or another email that specifies what it is that they're looking for. So I think this is effectively just putting into the statement what's been requested.
I think I'm not suggesting that you were necessarily making a decision as to what information should be contained in it, but you were actually doing the drafting. Is that fair? Based on the information that's being fed.
I must say, it's not what I would refer to as doing the drafting, but I mean, I inserted some words into it at somebody else's request. Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, please, to our final topic, at the top of this page, we have an email from you, forgive me, at the top of page 1, we have an email from you to Ms. Bremner about the extraction. Forgive me, we can see the middle of the page, 16th of November 2018. You say, Lucy, attached is the scan of the witness statement signed by Andy Dunks and the same in Word format. Just to clarify, Andy's confirmed to me that the first retrieval was supplied to WBD on CD and to Gareth by loading to a laptop. The second request was supplied to Gareth on a CD, but not to WBD, so factually the statement is correct. This is in relation to the method by which the data was supplied. What I want to ask you is this: why was it that Gareth Jenkins was being supplied with the audit data extracted in relation to the lead claimants?
I assume it's because he was being asked to carry out some analysis on it.
Thank you. Our final topic, please, before a couple of clarifications. You've indicated in your statement that the process of disclosure by Fujitsu was not supported by appropriate legal advice and oversight. Is that right?
In my opinion, correct.
Now, we've seen in the documents to which I've referred you today that Chris J, a senior member of Fujitsu's legal team, attended meetings and was copied into emails to requests for information and to responses. Is that fair?
Yes, but I think a relatively small number from what we can see in many of the other emails that we've looked at. He's not included.
He was quite closely involved in the early stages of disclosure. Is that right?
In the early stages,
particularly in
more so.
Resolving issues around the claimant's access to Kel software and Fujitsu's intellectual property rights.
I think that's right. I think he was involved in the discussion around the non-disclosure agreement, for example, yeah.
And he continues to be copied into emails. I accept not all emails, but he continues to be copied into emails throughout the period, does he not?
I'm not sure whether that's true. I mean, without looking at it and investigating it, I couldn't give you a definite answer off the top of my head, but my impression is that he wasn't closely involved with the process.
Some,
latterly,
not all.
particularly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
He was copied into some, but not all, I think is your...
That's my recollection, and that's what I believe that I see from emails that I look at, including many of the ones that we've looked at here today and that you've shown me over the last few weeks. Yeah, correct.
When you say that you feel that that you weren't given appropriate advice and oversight, is that specifically directed at Mr. J?
No, I mean, I don't think it would have mattered who it was, but maybe the Fujitsu legal department generally. So it's not a specific, it's not about a specific person, it's about
Forgive me, I don't
that
mean
role.
to imply it's personal, but he obviously had some oversight. You're saying it wasn't sufficient oversight. So does responsibility for that fall on him, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I recall recently seeing there was an email where he said he was handing over to somebody else, I think. So I can't quite remember the name of the person.
Was this a
but-
concern that you... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, so I mean, as I say, I think, can't quite remember now, but in some ways that's actually almost, indicative of the fact that I don't think there was that much oversight, is that I don't quite remember what happened to him in the end and whether he was replaced by someone else. But I'm fairly sure that I saw an email from him earlier in which he said he was handing over to another person. Julia, someone, possibly. Anyway.
Was this a concern which you had at the time?
I think it was much less clear to me at the time, and I'm not sure that it particularly worried me at the time, but I think looking back on it, that's quite clear.
What prompted you to look back on it to conclude in hindsight there wasn't sufficient advice and oversight?
I think particularly, for example, the amount of oversight that there has been in dealing with this inquiry, for example, has been much greater than it was over our interaction with WBD for the trial.
How do you think you would have acted differently had you had better advice and oversight?
I think probably there would have been a lot more resource, for one thing. As I think I explained in my witness statement, effectively, many of the people involved in this were kind of doing it as well as their normal day-to-day jobs. In fact, I don't think there was really, I suppose, probably apart from Dave Ibbott, but even then I'm not sure about him, whether anyone was actually doing it as their sole task. And there would have been more resource perhaps in terms of tools. And just the ability to actually do a greater amount of investigation and information gathering, and to be sure that we had all of the information that was available. I mean, in some ways, of course, yeah. No, that's...
Thank you. I have some very short points of clarification which I've been asked to raise, and which I'll do briefly now, if I may. During and after the group litigation, did you liaise with external lawyers other than Womble Bond Dickinson?
After the group litigation.
The reason I ask this specifically is that...
In any context, you mean?
So did you receive and deal with requests for disclosure from a Scottish law firm known as BTO Solicitors? Do you have any recollection of that?
Possibly. I vaguely think I've heard of them, so I may have done, but I don't recall.
You're not able to provide any details in relation to that disclosure?
Not without looking it up, potentially. No, I don't remember that.
Do you recall whether you disclosed any documents directly to the Crown Office or the Procurator Fiscal Service in Scotland?
I don't believe so. So I have been asked questions in relation to those bodies, but via Peters and Peters, I think, for Post Office.
Whilst you were dealing with document disclosure in the context of the group litigation, did you receive any advice or instruction about retaining documents for any of the following purposes? Firstly, use by the Criminal Case Review Commission?
Not directly, no.
And secondly, compliance with the ongoing duty of disclosure in criminal proceedings, whether by the CPS or...
I don't think so.
Do you recall there being any discussions about documents which you provided to the Post Office's lawyers being used in connection with any criminal proceedings or appeals?
No.
And in your role as document manager, have you been asked to locate and retain the scripts that were used by Fujitsu Helpline?
I have been involved in that question, yeah, but I recall not being able to do that. So, yeah, unsuccessfully if I was asked to be involved in it.
Thank you, sir. With the exception Sorry, excuse me 1 minute.
Yes.
Forgive me, sir. With the exception of Stephen Parker's evidence, that would conclude my questions.
Yeah.
There are some of the recognised legal representatives would like to ask questions. I'm conscious of the time. It's 4 o'clock, sir, and I think we will need to give our transcriber one additional break, perhaps a short break of 10 minutes. So it's really a question of whether we can get things wrapped up today within the time available.
Well, that's who wants to ask questions and how long are they going to take? Let's see where we are.
Sir, I have one question for the witness, and it will take less than a minute.
Right. Well, that's easy.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I hope so, sir. And in terms of a break, I have a personal matter that I need to deal with at 4:15. So even if there is going to be a break, would you allow me permission to ask that single question?
Of course, we'll have that in a second. Who is wanting to ask questions which will take longer than Mr. Steen's 1 minute-ish?
I also would like to ask some questions, sir. I could keep it to 10 minutes.
Right. Anyone else?
Sir, yes, I would like to ask some questions if possible. I can also keep it to 10 minutes, please.
Right. So we will have Mr. Steen's minute also now. Then we will have a short break, and then we'll have 2 10-minute sessions. All right. I think that's reasonable in all the circumstances. Everyone at least content? Fine. So, Mr. Steen, ask your questions, and then we'll have a short break.
Mr. Lenton, in my 60-second countdown, can I ask you just this? You've just been asked by Ms. Hodge questions that relate to the location and retention of scripts.
Right.
From the Fujitsu helpline. Your answer was you recall not being able to do that. Why were you not able to do that?
Because I wasn't able to locate them or find anybody who knew where they were. But I'm also aware of the fact that I wasn't the only person asked that question, and it was also fairly certain investigated by some other people in Fujitsu. So I don't think I reached a definitive conclusion on it, and others may have done.
Right. The others being?
Other people working for the Fujitsu legal team.
Okay. And do you know their names?
I do. What are their names?
To assist us, would you put that in writing and provide that answer to the inquiry?
I can do.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Right. We'll resume again at 4:15, and we'll aim to conclude by 25 to 5.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
I'm not sure who's going to go first. Ms. Page? Thank you.
Thank you. First topic is short, and I just want to ask you about your recollection to do with the providing of the Jenkins reports on data integrity. In your witness statement, you appear to have quite a clear memory of those reports and putting them onto your Dimensions system. Is that fair?
Yes.
Is there a reason why, given that this goes back, many years, the first email correspondence is from 2010, and presumably a little earlier when you actually put them on the system. Is there any reason why you can remember these reports so clearly?
I think it really is because, obviously, subsequently, their significance has become much more apparent to me. But then also there's the limited number of times in which we have provided them to Post Office, which we've done on more than one occasion, I think. and then the fact that there's only 2 of them and there's one for each version of Horizon. So it's a kind of, yeah, I mean, that's it really. They're just quite unusual, as I said earlier, in terms of the types of documentation that we hold.
Was there a sense that there was a concern around data integrity and that these reports sort of highlighted that and something around that?
Well, clearly when you read them, then it's apparent that someone at least does have some concern about it, yeah, because that's clearly what they're about. I mean, they're not very long, either of them, and they're clearly attempting to address a question.
Did you read them at the time? Do you have a memory of that?
I think I probably, yeah, I think so. I
So
mean, they're
that-
only like
that
6
maybe-
pages, aren't they, I think?
Indeed,
Or-
and that might be why they stick out, because they are about these concerns. Is that fair?
Possibly, and I think the other thing is that unlike many of the documents I see, they're actually just written in kind of what you might call normal prose that anybody might understand rather than being highly technical.
Yes. All right, thank you. Then in that case, what I'd like to move on to is the disclosure around remote access. You've described how the disclosure process was really iterative and responsive.
Yeah.
But when it came to the issue of remote access, there did come a time when it became quite a structured approach, didn't it? With a long table and various different issues relating to it that you were responding to. We can come to it in
Yeah, I was
due
going to say,
course.
I'm not completely sure what you're referring to, but I think there was are you referring to, there's an Excel file, I think, which has effectively is a big table showing all the different types of what could be regarded as remote access and who would be able to do them, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Before
right.
you go any further, Ms. Page, so that I'm not being slow, we're talking about disclosure relating to remote access in the GLO, are we?
Yes, that's absolutely right, sir.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
So as part of that process, you looked into the history of the SSC team using what they call the change control process in order to record occasions when they inserted transactions into branch accounts. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I did personally, but I might have done some of the work contributing to that, yeah.
All right, well, let's look at a document. It's FUJ 0018 9522. And if we can scroll to page 3 when it comes up, please. So on this page here, perhaps if we just go up a little, we can see what is going on. This is from Steve Parker to you, 24th of January. Various other people copied in, and he describes the, it's sort of slightly in shorthand, but it seems that the subject is in relation to Richard Roll 2, and there seems to be a sort of a further subject heading in the sense that he says, review a sample of OCPs to give an indication as to how frequently transaction data was injected.
Yeah.
And then he addresses you. Matthew, has become very difficult to provide. The original plan was to examine sample months of change control data and produce rough figures. This led me to the realization / remembering that support did not use change control in the earlier years for business as usual support actions. We relied on the audit trail within the incidents (peaks) to document support actions. We had auditability of the work done, but no change control entries. Reasoning behind this was implementing support actions ASAP. Nobody around to sign off overnight anyway. Audit trail is enough where no financial impact. And he then goes on to talk about trying to sample peak records.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons, well, the reason behind this, not using the proper change control process, was evidently a sort of a needs must. Is that fair?
It sounds like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
And if we could please keep a sort of an eye on that wording and go to how it was then communicated by you in document FUJ 0016 3098. And this is quite a long email train. If we go down to, first of all, page 3, just to give us some location of where we are. So that email at the bottom, 24th of January, from you to Jonathan Gribbin. Various other people copied in, including Gareth Jenkins and Andrew Parsons. And this is the sort of table that I was talking about. It looks like it probably did come from Excel or something.
Okay. It's not the one I was thinking of, but anyway. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's a long table with various aspects of disclosure that are being looked into. If we scroll all the way down, please, to page 10, we can look at the bit which follows the email that we were just looking at from Steve Parker. And if we scroll a little further, we can see that chunk in the middle that says Matthew Lenton. Mm-hmm. And the header there is the same as we saw in the email from Steve Parker. Review a sample of OCPs to give an indication as to how frequently transaction data was injected. And then you've inserted the description, but slightly different wording. This is proving difficult to provide, same. The original plan was to examine sample months of change control data and produce rough figures. Then, slightly different, as Pete Newsom already discussed with you, this led to it becoming apparent that support did not use formal change control in the earlier years for business as usual support actions. So that's gone from Mr. Parker saying that he actually remembered that they didn't use formal change control in the earlier years. Do you think that was properly communicated?
I must admit, to me, I'm not sure there's a big difference in those two things. I mean, it became apparent to us looking at this question as a result of Steve Parker remembering or whatever it was that he said.
All right, well, let's go a little further down. We relied on the audit trail within the incidents, brackets peaks, to document support actions. We had auditability of the work done, but no change control entries. And then we assume that the reasoning behind this was to allow implementation of support actions ASAP and the audit trail being good enough where there was no financial impact. So that really is a slight softening, if you like, of the needs must wording that we saw in Mr. Parker's email. Do you think that's fair?
Well, possibly. I mean, the meaning is almost the same, I would have said, isn't it?
What we don't see there is the reference to there just simply being no one around on the overnight desk. There is still this attempt to assure and provide assurance, but there is a sort of a softening. Would you accept that or not?
Possibly. I mean, yeah.
All right. Well, then just this. The answers that you received from Mr. Parker about what the SSC team were doing and those needs must actions that they were taking, the wording that you've used was more or less conveyed to Mr. Degar-Robinson, KC. And that was in the context of him having said that answers around this issue, and if it were true that the SSC were not using change control processes, it would be, quote, disastrous for the case. And I'll give the reference so that those interested can look it up. We don't need to go there now. Poll 0041 6010. So evidently this answer was considered important by the person in charge of the litigation. Was there ever any comeback, ever anything further to you, or anything that you know of to Mr. Parker on this subject?
Not that I recall specifically, no.
No. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr.
Okay.
Lenton. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Page.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Lenton. I ask questions on behalf of Gareth Jenkins, and I want to ask you some questions about Fujitsu's work in the context of the GLO proceedings, if I may. You've been asked some questions earlier today about Mr. Jenkins's role, and you said, essentially, that there was a team of people who would help to analyse the information in order to answer questions from Womblebon Dickinson.
Right.
And he was one of these people because of his long-standing expertise and knowledge in Horizon.
Yep.
Is that right? Have I paraphrased that
I
correctly?
think so, yeah.
Thank you. But you weren't told anything specifically about his role other than in those terms. Is that correct?
No, not really. I mean, obviously, I knew him fairly well in any case. So, yeah, I mean, I just accepted that that's what he was doing. He was analysing information that we were providing to him when he was asked to.
Does it follow that you weren't informed as to why Mr. Jenkins was not called as a witness in the GLO proceedings?
I don't believe so, no.
And were you ever told by WBD or Pol not to direct queries to Mr. Jenkins unless this was unavoidable?
No.
You've also been asked about why Mr. Jenkins, who was not himself a GLO witness, was being asked to feed information and evidence to individuals who were witnesses from Fujitsu.
Right.
And I think Mr. Godseth was mentioned in particular in the context of that question. And I think your answer was that you would not necessarily characterise it in that way. Do you recall that?
Correct, yeah.
Was the position that there were multiple individuals within Fujitsu who assisted the Post Office with technical input into the expert and witness evidence that transpired as part of the GLO proceedings?
Yeah, and in fact, there were people in that immediate virtual team who weren't witnesses, such as John Simpkins and Mark Wright.
Yes, indeed, within
Yeah.
the 6 that you have identified. And is this right, that these individuals were performing tasks such as providing analysis on material like peaks and kells, answering questions from WBD on discrete technical issues? Sorry, you're nodding.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Providing commentary on witness statements and expert reports, such as the Coyne reports, the Jason Coyne reports, that had been served by the claimants in the proceedings.
Yes.
Preparing technical analysis of bugs, errors and defects that had been
Correct.
identified. And indeed commenting on the draft witness statements that were produced by the Fujitsu witnesses who were to be called by Pol.
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
And you, as you've said, identified 6 individuals who were part of that team, but I think you've made clear that that wasn't an exhaustive list.
No, that's right. There were other people who also worked on the Post Office account who were consulted about various matters, correct?
Thank you. So is it fair to say that Mr. Jenkins was one of a number of Fujitsu personnel, or to use your phrase, a team of people, who performed these tasks, including commenting on witness statements?
Correct, yeah.
And indeed, is this right, that it would have been practically impossible for one person in Fujitsu to perform that role because of its sheer scale, but also the multiplicity of expertise that it demanded?
That's correct. So I recall, for example, that I think we'd split up all of the I'm trying to remember the phrase that was used, but all of the issues that came out of the supplemental report of Jason Coyne were split among the members of that virtual team, yeah.
You've identified one of the 2 examples I'm going to come to,
Right.
the 22 bugs that Jason Coyne identified.
And I think there were more than that originally, actually, that they were asked to analyse, yeah.
Thank you. before I come on to those examples, is this also right, that this process that was going on within this team was collaborative? People were working together on these tasks?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
And I say it was collaborative partly because there was a fundamental principle of peer review within that team. People would review each other's output.
That's correct, yeah.
And also there was sometimes something in the form of a dialogue between people of different expertise within Fujitsu. So, for example, someone might say, this is a question that's better placed within the SSC. It would be forwarded to someone like John Simpkins. He would feed back and it would all enter the mix.
I think that's definitely true, yeah, because, I mean, I think that the issues weren't just kind of randomly divided up among people. They were depending on who was seen as being more expert in that area, yeah.
Thank you very much. If I can then go to two examples, I'll take your example first, if I may. I think what you're referring to is the exercise that was conducted in May 2019 of effectively dividing up the 22, or I think it then transpired 29 bugs that had been identified by Mr. Coyne amongst individuals within this team.
Right.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
I'm not going to take you to the email just because of time, but for everyone else's note, it's FUJ 000081836. But do you recall an instruction from Pete Newsom, which was communicated to the likes of Dave Ibbott, Steve Parker, Mark Wright, John Simpkins, Torsten Godseith, and Mr. Jenkins, effectively saying we need to divide up this list of bugs. Each one needs a lead person.
Yeah.
Do you recall that? There will then be a process of consolidation and peer review. Do you recall that being the process?
I believe so, yeah, and I believe that I actually tracked the progress on each of them, yeah.
I'm grateful. So you were effectively administering that process.
Helping to keep track of what was going on, yeah.
Thank you. Can I then go to a second example, which I suggest is indicative of this collaborative way of responding to the GLO proceedings? And if we do go to this document, please, it's FUJ 001795541. And just while that's being brought up, this is in the context of Torsten Godseith's first draft statement in September 2018. If we can go right to the bottom of this chain, please. Thank you. So sorry, can we just go up a little bit so I can... Thank you very much, that's perfect. So this is an email from you to Alan Holmes, Gareth C. Mungle, and Gareth Jenkins, copying in Pete Newsom and Dave Ibbott. Alan, Gareth S. and Gareth J. Please see attached Torsten's draft witness statement. He has asked that the three of you review it and provide any feedback or clarifications. Moving down. Note that currently the draft has been provided to Torsten by WBD based on a previous statement with yellow highlighted sections where WBD are asking specific questions. And as you can see, Torsten has made amendments and track changes and added comments. If we go to the next email in that chain, please. Thank you. The following day, the 21st of September, Pete Newsom says, WBD have asked for a response today, if at all possible. Let me know if you can't do this. Just as a side note, was it often the case that Fujitsu were being asked to respond to requests by WBD within very tight and pressurised timeframes?
Yeah, that happened quite often, yeah.
Thank you. And also, of course, this is an example, isn't it, where technical input is being asked for but from Alan Holmes and Gareth C. Mungle, who aren't in your shortlist of 6 people.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. If we can scroll up then, please, to the next email in the chain. So we see Alan Holmes provides a version of the document with comments. And then if we scroll up, please. I think the two Gareths are being asked then to build on that as a base, so add their comments into Alan Holmes's document.
Yeah.
If we can go up then, please. An email from Gareth Jenkins. I've just got back in. I'll certainly add to Alan's comments. Not sure if I can finish this afternoon, depends how long it is. I'll look after lunch. And then up, please. Gareth C. Mungle, I think at this stage, has added his comments. So ask Gareth Jenkins, are you okay to build on top of this version, please? And then if we go up to the next email, please, from Gareth Jenkins later that same day, I've finally gone through it all. Attached is the version with everybody's comments. There are a couple of my comments that suggest that Gareth S. may like to add clarifications, but I see he had not picked up on those areas. And then the final email in this chain from Gareth C. Mungle, Gareth responded to your questions attached. So the reason I suggest this might be typical is because what we see here is a multiplicity of individuals commenting on a draft statement. Is that right?
Certainly that's what there is here, yeah.
And also something of that dialogue that I mentioned between the two Gareths, posing questions and answering questions between each other.
That's true, yeah.
And would you have said that this process that we see here with Torsten Godseth's statement was relatively typical of the way that Fujitsu worked on these draft witness statements?
So, yeah, well, I must admit, I'm not quite... So I think I'm trying to think of how many there were. So, obviously, this is Torsten's, and then there was Steve Parker's. I mean, I assume that Steve Parker's was looked at in considerable detail, particularly by his SSC colleagues. And I think the Andy Dunk's witness statement we've already looked at, and that was very short and was more or less pre-written, as it were. And then I think the other one was Bill Membry, and I have to admit I don't really recall the content of that one. So certainly in the case of this witness statement, it was done like that, but there were only 4 witnesses, I think.
Can I shortcut it? In terms of the 2 technical witnesses, Mr. Goddeseth and Mr. Parker, it seems clear from even this limited line of questioning that there was a good deal of collaboration before the witness statements were finalised.
Yes.
Fine. I think you've made your point.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
Thank you. Right, well, that brings the session to a close today. Thank you very much, Mr. Lenton, for your witness statement and for answering the questions of a number of people throughout the afternoon. I'm grateful to you. So we'll break off now and resume again tomorrow morning with Mr. Parker. Yeah? Sorry, Mr. Parsons, not Mr. Parker. I shouldn't confuse those 2 people, I don't think. All right. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, sir.